Suddenly, the joyful atmosphere is shattered. A police officer steps forward, his voice loud and commanding. "You can't play here! Pack it up!" The musician looks up, his hands freezing on the strings. "But I'm not bothering anyone," he says, his tone calm but pleading. "I said, pack it up," the officer barks, his hand resting on the baton at his belt. Bruno's relaxed expression hardens. Lowering his hood, he steps forward. "Excuse me, officer," he says, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "What's going on here?" The officer turns, startled to see who's intervening. The musician, too, looks at Bruno, his eyes widening in disbelief. What did Bruno Mars do next? Stay tuned to find out. The day had started like any other for Bruno Mars. Taking a break from his hectic schedule, he decided to explore the city, finding inspiration in its vibrant energy. The streets were alive with activity, vendors selling their wares, children laughing as they chased each other, and the occasional street performer adding a soundtrack to it all. Bruno had always admired street musicians. He knew what it was like to perform for strangers, hoping to connect with someone through the power of music. It reminded him of his early days, singing for tips and dreaming of stardom. That's why, when he heard the gentle strumming of a guitar as he turned the corner, he couldn't resist stopping to listen. The musician was a young man in his mid-20s, his clothes simple and slightly worn. Despite his humble appearance, his music was anything but ordinary. His voice was soulful, and his fingers danced effortlessly over the guitar strings. A small crowd had gathered, some tossing coins into the open guitar case at his feet. Bruno leaned against a lamppost, letting the music wash over him. The melody was raw and heartfelt, a song about chasing dreams despite life's challenges. It struck a chord deep within Bruno, reminding him of his own journey. He smiled to himself, blending into the crowd, content to simply enjoy the moment. The mood shifted abruptly when a police officer approached. His footsteps were heavy, his presence authoritative. The crowd parted as he stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the musician. "You can't play here," the officer said, his tone sharp. The musician paused mid-strum, looking up in surprise. "I'm sorry, officer," he said, his voice respectful. "I didn't know this area was restricted. I'm just trying to make a living." The officer crossed his arms. "This is private property. You're disturbing the peace. Pack up your stuff and move along." "But no one's complained," the musician replied, gesturing to the smiling crowd. "People are enjoying the music." The officer's expression hardened. "I don't care. Rules are rules. Either you move or I'll move you." The crowd murmured uneasily, some people looking at each other as if expecting someone to intervene. Bruno stepped forward, his usual relaxed demeanor replaced with quiet determination. "Excuse me," Bruno said, his voice calm but firm. "What's the problem here?" The officer turned, his brows furrowing as he looked at Bruno. "Who are you to ask?" Bruno pulled off his hood, revealing his face. The crowd gasped, whispers of recognition spreading like wildfire. "That's Bruno Mars," someone exclaimed. "I'm someone who cares about what's fair," Bruno replied evenly. "This man isn't hurting anyone. He's just sharing his music." The officer hesitated, clearly thrown off by Bruno's presence, but unwilling to back down. "This isn't about the music," he said. "It's about following the rules." Bruno glanced at the musician, who looked both nervous and grateful. Turning back to the officer, Bruno said, "Sometimes the rules don't make sense. Look around. Everyone here is enjoying themselves. Music brings people together. Isn't that worth something?" The officer shifted uncomfortably, his stern exterior cracking just slightly. I'm just doing my job. And I respect that, Bruno said, his tone softening. But maybe there's a way to do your job without shutting down something beautiful. The tension eased as Bruno continued speaking. He stepped closer to the musician, picking up the open guitar case. "How about this?" he said, addressing both the officer and the crowd. "Let's turn this into something positive." Bruno reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, placing it in the case. "If anyone else feels like supporting this incredible talent, go ahead." The crowd erupted into applause. People stepped forward, dropping bills and coins into the guitar case. The musician's eyes filled with tears as he watched the support pour in. Even the officer seemed moved. He sighed, stepping back slightly. "Fine," he said gruffly, "but keep it down and don't block the sidewalk." Bruno smiled. "Fair enough. Thank you, officer." The musician nodded gratefully. "Thank you, sir," he said to the officer, his voice trembling with emotion. Bruno turned to the crowd. "Now, let's give him a real audience," he said, clapping his hands. "Play something for us." The musician wiped his eyes and strummed his guitar, his voice stronger and more confident than before. The crowd cheered, their energy lifting the entire street. Bruno stood in the front row, clapping along and singing quietly to himself. When the song ended, the musician looked at Bruno, his gratitude evident. "I don't know how to thank you." Bruno placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "Just keep playing. The world needs more people like you." The story didn't end there. A passerby had recorded the entire incident, and the video quickly went viral. Social media exploded with praise for Bruno's actions, calling him a hero for standing up for the musician. People from all over the world reached out to the musician, offering support and opportunities. A week later, the young musician, whose name was Alex, received a call from a record label. They had seen the video and were impressed by his talent. Alex's life changed overnight, and he never forgot the man who had stepped in when it mattered most. This story reminds us that one act of kindness can change a life forever. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment where someone stood up for what was right? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Story Dash for more uplifting and inspiring tales. Together, let's make the world a better place, one story at a time.